I want you to imagine something for a moment. Close your eyes and think about being trapped. Trapped in a box, small and dark, with barely enough air to breathe. Imagine spending 23 hours a day in that box, unable to move, unable to scream, and worst of all, unable to escape. This isn't just a terrifying nightmare. This is the story of Colleen Stan, a young woman who endured 7 years of unimaginable torment. Today, I'm going to take you through every chilling detail of her ordeal, how she survived, and how she found the courage to finally escape. This is the true story of Colleen Stan, the girl in the box. Colleen's survival is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Today, I'm taking you deep into her ordeal. From her fateful decision to hitchhike to the unimaginable horrors she endured, and her courageous escape, we'll uncover every chilling detail. If you're ready to hear this incredible story, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Your support helps us bring more important stories like this to light. Now let's dive in. The year was 1977. I want you to think about this for a second. No smartphones, no GPS, no instant communication. People often relied on hitchhiking to get from one place to another. It was common, and it seemed harmless enough. That's where our story begins, with Colleen Stan. She was just 20 years old, full of life, and excited to visit a friend in California for her birthday. On May 19th, Colleen decided to hitchhike from Eugene, Oregon, to her friend's house in Northern California. She felt confident. She had hitchhiked before and considered herself a good judge of character. But that day, her instincts would fail her in the most horrifying way. Picture this: a young Colleen standing on the side of the road with her backpack. A car pulls over, and inside, she sees what looks like a safe and ordinary family. Cameron Hooker is driving. His wife Janice sits beside him, and their infant daughter is in the back seat. Would you feel safe? I would. Colleen did too. She climbed into the car, thinking this family couldn't possibly mean her any harm. But just a short while later, everything changed. The Hookers stopped at an isolated area. Cameron pulled out a knife. He forced Colleen into a homemade wooden box designed to trap her body. From that moment on, Colleen was no longer a free woman. She was a prisoner, and Cameron Hooker was her captor. When I first heard what Colleen went through, I couldn't believe it. Cameron Hooker didn't just kidnap her. He created a living hell for her. He kept her in his basement, in a coffin-sized wooden box, for 23 hours a day. She wasn't allowed to speak or make noise. When she was let out, it wasn't for kindness. Cameron used her as a slave, forcing her to obey his every command. Janice, his wife, stood by and helped enforce these rules. Colleen's world became smaller and darker with every passing day. She didn't just lose her freedom, she lost her identity. The box was small, barely big enough to stretch out in. She couldn't move freely. She was physically trapped in a space so confined, she could barely turn her body. Every hour, every minute, she was reminded that she was no longer in control of her life. It was as if the world outside had stopped existing for her. Colleen would spend 23 hours in the box. She was forbidden from making a sound. She had to lie still, not even daring to move. The box itself was like a prison within a prison. The silence must have been deafening. But there were times when Colleen was taken out of the box. When that happened, it wasn't for kindness. Cameron Hooker had a carefully planned routine to break her down, to keep her under his control. When she was allowed out, Cameron would chain her to the wall or the bed. She was still a prisoner, but now more vulnerable. He would force her to do things, tasks, humiliations, and even acts of violence, things she had no choice but to endure. One of the most horrifying parts of her captivity was the 20-pound hinged box that was placed over her head. This wasn't just a cage, it was a trap designed to break her spirit. The box was made of metal, heavy, and completely sealed off Colleen's senses. When it was locked onto her head, she couldn't see, hear, or breathe properly. The confinement was unbearable, forcing her to endure suffocating darkness and silence for hours at a time. It was a tool of total control, physical, emotional, and psychological torture. But that wasn't all. When she wasn't wearing the box, Colleen was confined to another prison, a small wooden box under the bed. The box was so tiny she could barely move, often left in total darkness. This space was meant to isolate her even further, keeping her hidden away from the world and trapped in fear. There were times when Cameron would make Colleen wear a collar, a leather strap around her neck like an animal. He would tell her that if she disobeyed him, the company would come for her family. This was the lie that kept her from trying to escape, from asking for help, even when she had the chance to. But that's not all. Colleen was forced to act as if everything was normal when visitors came. Cameron's wife, Janice, played a significant role in this. She would help with the charade, pretending like Colleen wasn't a prisoner. To the outside world, Colleen was just another woman in the family home. But in reality, she was still in captivity. And even though Colleen was allowed some brief moments of freedom outside the box, it was always under Cameron's watchful eye. He would sometimes take her to the store, or even let her visit her family, but always with the constant reminder of the threats hanging over her head. Cameron had complete control, and Colleen knew any attempt to escape might end in deadly consequences for her loved ones. The worst part was that Colleen started to lose herself. After being kept in the box for so long, her sense of time and reality began to blur. She was physically weak, emotionally broken, and spiritually crushed. Cameron's constant abuse and manipulation took its toll on her, but Colleen wasn't alone in her suffering. Janice, Cameron's wife, was complicit. She wasn't just a bystander, she was actively involved in Colleen's captivity. At one point, Colleen was even forced to sign a slave contract, agreeing to be Cameron's property. This wasn't just about control over her body, it was control over her mind, her spirit. And that's what made it so terrifying. Cameron didn't just want to imprison Colleen physically. He wanted to break her mentally, turn her into someone who would never think of escaping. Every day, Colleen faced the harsh reality of her captivity. And while she fought to stay strong, the psychological torture was just as cruel as the physical one. The box, the chains, the threats, they all worked together to keep her trapped in this hell. What makes this story even more unsettling is that Colleen wasn't always locked away. Cameron sometimes let her leave the house. At one point, she even visited her family. But even then, she was too terrified to ask for help. Imagine sitting with your loved ones, knowing you could tell them everything, and still staying silent because you feared for their lives. That's the level of control Cameron had over her. After 7 years of captivity, Colleen had lived through unimaginable suffering. But the story doesn't end there. For all of Cameron Hooker's control, there was one thing he couldn't dominate: the human will to survive, and the love that sometimes lies buried beneath years of fear. In Colleen's darkest days, something began to shift. Janice broke the cycle, the woman who had been complicit in Colleen's torture. But she wasn't always the same person she had been when the captivity began. As the years passed, Janice's role in Colleen's imprisonment began to eat away at her. She began questioning the life she had built with Cameron and the horrors she was helping to inflict on Colleen. Deep down, Janice knew that what they were doing was wrong, but the bond of fear and obedience to her husband had kept her from acting, until the weight of it all became too much. Janice at last realized that Cameron's control over both her and Colleen wasn't just destroying Colleen's life, it was destroying her own. So after years of silence, Janice decided to break free from her chains, and in doing so, she reached out to Colleen. She confessed something that would change everything. The company that Cameron had threatened her with wasn't real. It was a lie. A twisted manipulation Cameron had used to keep Colleen in fear for all those years. And now, Janice was telling her that it was all just a tactic. There was no company, no one coming to harm her family if she escaped. This was a turning point in Colleen's story. The fear that had bound her was starting to unravel, but it wasn't enough to just hear the truth. Colleen had been a prisoner for so long that even the possibility of escape seemed foreign, even impossible. But Janice's revelation sparked something in her, a tiny ember of hope. Colleen, who had been afraid to even dream of freedom, now had a glimmer of a chance to break free. Janice didn't stop at just telling Colleen the truth. She took the next step. With what little courage she had left, Janice helped Colleen to escape. It wasn't easy. Colleen had been so isolated for so long she didn't know where to turn. But Janice, finally freed from the chains of fear, guided her toward the courage she needed. On August 23, 1984, Colleen took that terrifying first step. She walked out of the hooker home, and for the first time in 7 years, she was free. But freedom didn't come without its own challenges. Colleen, who had been isolated from the world for so long, didn't know where to go. She had no money, no phone, and no idea who she could trust. But she knew one thing. She had to go to the police. She walked into a nearby store, trembling but determined. She told the clerk that she was the woman who had been missing for years. And with that, the truth was finally out. The police were called, and Colleen's long nightmare was over. In an instant, Colleen's world shifted. The police responded quickly, taking her in, offering her safety and support. For Colleen, it must have felt like a new beginning, though it was hard to fully comprehend. After 7 years of captivity, how do you process what's happened? How do you begin to heal? But Colleen wasn't alone in this. The authorities immediately began to investigate Cameron Hooker, who was arrested shortly after Colleen's escape. His carefully crafted web of lies and abuse began to unravel. Cameron was arrested, charged with kidnapping, rape, and false imprisonment. He would eventually be sentenced to 104 years in prison, though he would later try to claim that Colleen had been his willing participant. That, of course, was a lie. Colleen's courage to escape not only ended her captivity, but also brought justice to Cameron Hooker. In the end, Colleen Stan was a survivor, and her story is a testament to the human spirit's resilience. She had faced horrors most of us could never imagine, but in the end, she broke free. Colleen Stan, after escaping, went through extensive therapy to recover from the physical and psychological trauma. She went on to lead a relatively quiet life, working with organizations that support abused women and earning a degree in accounting. She also got married and had a daughter. Cameron Hooker was arrested and eventually sentenced to 104 years in prison. Colleen had to face him in court and relive her trauma to ensure justice was served. Janice's case was more complicated. She did not face immediate charges at the time of Colleen's rescue. Law enforcement seemed to focus on Cameron as the primary perpetrator, given the horrific nature of his actions. In the years following Colleen's escape, Janice's involvement in the crime came under further scrutiny. However, she never faced criminal charges related to her involvement in Colleen's captivity. One reason cited was that she had been manipulated and coerced by Cameron for years, and authorities may have viewed her as a victim of emotional and psychological abuse as well. Janice did not serve jail time, though her role was heavily criticized by the public. Over time, she was not legally held accountable for her direct involvement in the crimes. Janice eventually divorced Cameron Hooker. She moved away from him and started a new life, though the details of her life after the divorce are not widely known. She reportedly remarried and lived quietly in a different area, trying to distance herself from the past. Today, Colleen Stan's story is a testament to resilience. She's a survivor in every sense of the word. What Colleen went through is beyond comprehension, but her story teaches us something important: the strength of the human spirit. To anyone out there feeling trapped, whether physically, mentally, or emotionally, Colleen's story is proof that escape is possible. You are stronger than you know. Thank you for watching. If you found this story impactful, please like, subscribe, and share to help spread awareness.